How do you like that for a barn stormer of a dyno video, all at 4400 RPM? That is the story beginning of Project Junky Junk 352. So I found this engine off of Craigslist one time when I was browsing around. I think I paid $200 for it. And didn't know at the time, but it was going to give us a lot of data and a lot of fun. So this is just a 66 352 out of a Ford pickup truck. Had the oil bath air cleaner and a 2-barrel intake carburetor setup. Nothing special whatsoever. I like to do these dyno mules every once in a while, and it was fun to find this one and to bring it home and to get it running and get it on the dyno. So first thing is I got it up on the engine stand and just pulled the valve covers to see what kind of shape it was in. And as you can expect, these engines just don't really age well as far as oil sludge and that sort of thing under the valve covers. I could easily pull out my soapbox and step up on it regarding old oil and detergents and factory valve tins and that sort of thing, but did an oil change on it, put a fuel pump block off plate on, and went ahead and changed the water pump to a new water pump just to make sure that we didn't have any issues with the water pump on the dyno, and then went ahead and got it mounted up on the dyno. So did the same treatment as we do all of our FEs, hooked them up with the dyno headers, and obviously headers and a recurved MSD adds a little bit of horsepower. Some of the exhaust manifold bolts were stripped out or broken, so we had to employ some different techniques. I know you're dying to hear it one more time. So as a recap of that dyno session, with the 2100 auto-light carburetor, 42 degrees of timing, the recurved MSD distributor and a set of headers, we made 208 horsepower and 300 pound-feet of torque. That's with the factory 186 at 50,000 duration camshaft, 114 lobe separation angle, and 400 lift at the valve. Iteration 2 was popping on a Holley 500 2-barrel carburetor. Power went up to 234 and the torque stayed at 300. And then for the last iteration of that factory combo, we popped on a Blue Thunder single 4-barrel carburetor with a Holley 650 double pumper and made 264 horsepower and 344 pound-feet of torque. So I bought a brand new Mustang GT in 2002 that had the 4.6 liter V8, and when that engine brand new, rated from the factory at 260 horsepower. So the little 352 that's from 1966 bested my Mustang GT engine by 4 horsepower, which is pretty neat. So this shot is when I got it back home and started taking it apart. The plan from here on out was to completely disassemble the engine and get it into a modern setup. So those are the factory pistons right there, and all the sludge is factory. And then I even took a few seconds to degree the cam that was in it, just to have some data on that. One of the guys from the older Ford FE forum wanted some data, so that would be a good time to do it. Alright, so once it was torn down, the block and the crank, the heads were all taken to be machined. The block is treated to our normal treatment of engine blocks, baked and tumbled, a line honed with ARP fasteners, bored and honed with torque plates. We went to a 4040 bore size, and the decks were squared up. And just a little treatment on the inside of the block to take away some of the casting flash and remove some of the nastiness that's left over from the factory casting process. Block was painted with duplicolor ceramic engine paint. You can see there that the oil filter, or I'm sorry, the oil pump orifice was blended into the block, gasket matched, and all the bearing holes were matched up to the bearings slightly, gently. Take another time to say you do not have to waller those holes out. Just flare the side of them to match the bearing. Sometimes you can open up the bearing a little bit to match the hole in the block. So lots of different ways of doing things without making the hole humongously large in the main saddles. Bottoms of the cylinders were deburred. Holes in the lifter valley were deburred. And then we added some vents and blocks on the lifter valley to keep the oil from hitting the rotating assembly. On the cylinder head side of things, we went to some 209-165 SI stainless valves with a 5/16 stem, and we changed the valve springs to obviously we put in some bronze valve guides and put on some pack valve springs, small diameter, dual springs with titanium retainers with about 700 pounds over the nose of spring load. The factory cam came out, and one of my custom solid rollers went in, and somewhere in the mid 250s at 50 thousandths duration, and about 700 lift. Then as the engine started going back together, put it back together with a Blue Thunder Police Interceptor replica intake. And you can see some non-adjustable rocker arms. So you may be thinking, okay, you just said solid roller. How are you running a non-adjustable rocker arm? Well, you can do it. It takes a good bit of time to get it all set up, but at this time I was getting my non-adjustable roller rockers out on the market. I wanted to show everybody how much load and torture they could take. So with 700 pounds of spring load over the nose, they did just perfectly fine. And I was able to vary the lash cap thicknesses and put some little shims under the lash caps to get the lash correct. But yeah, we ran a fairly large solid roller cam with the Lykins Motorsports non-adjustable roller rockers. And here's what she looked like all put back together and ready for a dyno session. So 4040 bore, used the factory 352 crank, Molnar rods, custom Racetech pistons, 1mm, 1mm, 2mm piston rings. Compression ratio went up to 10.4 to 1. A new factory replacement water pump, powered by 4 valve covers, a replacement FE distributor that's been locked out with a steel gear, and the Blue Thunder police interceptor intake, and one of my custom solid roller camshafts. So this would be the 4th iteration, and with this setup and a Holley 830 carburetor, it made 433 horsepower at 6,800 RPM and 405 pound-feet of torque. So after that dyno session, we pulled the heads off and sent them to Joe Crane to have them ported. Joe added, if I remember correctly, between 40 and 50 CFM to the C6 AER heads, and they were pushing somewhere around 290 CFM. So those heads came back, everything went back on, and we went from 433 horsepower at 6,800 RPM to 465 horsepower at 7,200 RPM. The torque went from 405 to 410. So there's 2 points of data right there. The difference that head porting will make on an engine of this configuration, and also the difference in RPM peaks from around 40 CFM of port work. So we gained 400 RPM in horsepower peaks, and went up about 32 horsepower. So after this, the engine went through just a variety of intake manifold changes, and the next iteration was a Blue Thunder medium riser 2x4 intake. For some reason, I don't have a picture of that, and I know that I took them, but I can't seem to find it. But the Blue Thunder medium riser 2x4 with two 1850 carburetors. Basically, we didn't get any more horsepower. It was 464 horsepower, and the peak went down to 6,600. So something it didn't like there. After the medium riser 2x4, Joe told me that he had one of Jay Brown's FE Power intake adapters, and he also had a ported 351 Cleveland tunnel ram intake. So that seemed to be the next step that I wanted to take the engine to, and we just went through several combinations of that using different carburetors. The first iteration with that tunnel ram intake made 512 horsepower at 7,000 RPM and 445 pound-feet of torque. That was with a couple of 660s that I borrowed from Jay Brown, and he had always had good luck with those carburetors, and he was willing to loan them to me, so I took them and tried them out. What's nice though is it clean when it takes dry, so. We tried many different carburetor setups, and then there's some Mickey Thompson valve covers and some inline, I think they were 600s. But we went through several different carburetor setups, and like I said, the 7th iteration was 512 horsepower at 7,000 RPM, 445 pound-feet of torque. And then I ordered some custom built 660s from Drew down at Air Fuel Spark, and that's what you see there. And excellent set of carburetors, and we finally ended up with 531 horsepower at 7,200 RPM with 457 pound-feet of torque. So not bad for 7,000 RPM and under 10.5 to 1 compression. A nice little dyno mule of an engine that really served us well. So after all those dyno sessions, I decided to tear it down and see how it was doing inside, and do some bearing checks and do some other checks. And the bearings looked perfectly fine. I used some coated Federal Mogul bearings on the mains, and some cheap cheap as they come rod bearings. I think they were just some regular King rod bearings, nothing special at all. So all the bearings looked very good. I was using an M57 B pump for the dyno test, and a good quality oil pan with lots of volume in it. I honestly don't know how many pulls we put on the engine, with all the different intakes and cylinder head changes, and I just completely lost count. I should have kept a log of it, but there's everything coming back apart. And I ran about 36 thousandths of piston to head clearance quench distance on this engine. Tried to get it as tight as I can. I would not go any tighter than that. You'll see here in a second that starting to see contact between the head and the piston, and it started knocking a little bit of carbon off the pistons. So we used a Felpro 1020 gasket at 40 thousandths, and the pistons were hanging out of the hole about 4 thousandths of an inch. Here's a shot of the short block. And then just a little bit of contact where it's starting to knock the carbon off. So that is the story of the original Junky Junk, our 352. That engine has gained a lot of notoriety over the internet for the past several years, and I've caught a lot of trash because of that engine. It brings out the worst in some people. I don't know if they're jealous or what, but a lot of people take pot shots at it. A lot of people asked why I wasted so much time and money on a 352, but I tell you, I'd be more than happy to have that 352 in pretty much anything, and it would run well against a lot of the other engines out there today. There's nothing left of JJ anymore. The block got freshened up and sent to, I believe, Europe. The crank is no longer in my possession. The heads got sent to Massachusetts. I think the intake and the intake adapter and the carburetors are in Oregon. So not much left of JJ, but he served his purpose, and we got lots and lots of good data from the various dyno testing that we did. Alright guys, thank you for watching this one. I believe this may be the meanest 352 on the planet. As sure as the world I say that, somebody will pipe up and say, oh, I've got one that made 600 horsepower. So hesitate to say it's the meanest, but in my limited scope of knowledge, it is the biggest and baddest 352 that's out there. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so that you don't miss out on all the cool Ford stuff coming through the shop. Stay tuned for more videos from our JJ Jr., our 302 5-liter project. And thank you guys for chipping in and helping out with the costs involved with that engine. We've just got started on that engine, so lots and lots and lots of cool stuff coming down the pipe for it. So stay tuned, and hope you guys are having a good weekend.